It's time for Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla. Stay tuned for insights, impact, and inspiration right here on Channel Africa. Available on the Channel Africa app. Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
It's exactly 2100 Central African Time. Happy Friday and good evening and welcome to Africa World Hour. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective, broadcasting live from Johannesburg in South Africa. You can also catch us live on SABC Plus app, on DSTV Audio Bouquet, channel 802 and OpenView, channel 628. My name is Innocent Semosa, in for Tsepiso Makwetla. And you can follow us on social media for updates, highlights and exclusive content. On X, we are at Channel Africa 1, on Facebook, Channel Africa, on Instagram at Channel Africa 1, on TikTok at Channel Africa 1, on YouTube at Channel Africa 1. You can also send us a voice note or a message on this number, +27 714 4459, or send us an email at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za.
It's time for Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla. Stay tuned for insights, impact, and inspiration right here on Channel Africa. Available on the Channel Africa app.
And let's look at Africa World, our top stories this evening. Now, the co-chairperson of the Joint Standing Committee on Defence in South Africa, Malusi Gigaba, has issued a strong warning that Parliament will not allow the deployment of troops in the DRC without a credible readiness report. He was speaking during a tense meeting in Parliament. The Defence Ministry was sent to rework its preparation on Operation Mistral, which is South Africa's long-running peacekeeping mission in the Congo, where the SNDF troops support the UN in stabilizing conflict zones. Gigaba says the committee may have to convene an urgent follow-up session before soldiers are deployed.
If this response is not ready for today, we might have to request that another session be held prior to the departure of the rotating soldiers, so that we are given that comprehensive briefing and we satisfy ourselves that good decisions have been taken in this regard.
And now the chief research specialist at the Human Science Research Council in South Africa, Dr. Stephen Gordon, says disadvantaged communities are the hardest hit by the country's high corruption rates. This is among the findings of a study conducted by the HSRC. It also found that many adults reported living in communities where public officials engaged in bribery, nepotism, and sexual extortion. Now, the study explored how South Africans can be encouraged to adopt an anti-corruption mindset and work with the authorities to fight corruption. Gordon says protecting whistleblowers is key to fighting corruption.
We need to strengthen protection for whistleblowers, publicize successful anti-corruption actions, and promote anonymous tip-off hotlines. Policymakers must recognize the role of economic disadvantage and design interventions that take these inequalities into account when looking to fight corruption.
And now the German parliament has voted in favor of reinstating military service. It comes as students in about 90 cities across Germany have been taking part in a school strike in protest against the move. The BBC's Bethany Bell in Berlin has more details about the law.
All 18-year-old men will have to fill in a questionnaire and undergo a medical examination to check their suitability for military service. Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz says he wants to create Europe's strongest conventional army. The government says military service will be voluntary for as long as possible. However, if the security situation gets worse or if there are too few volunteers, the government could decide to make it compulsory with the approval of Parliament.
A British and Swedish study into the impact of deep-sea mining, the largest conducted so far, has confirmed that it causes significant damage to animal life on the ocean floor. The study found the number of living animals was reduced by 37% in mid areas. It also analyzed the impact of mining in the Pacific Ocean, as Dr. Andreas Glover, who's a deep-sea scientist with Britain's Natural History Museum, explains.
In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, between Hawaii and Mexico, is a vast region of the seafloor, 4,000 to 5,000 meters deep. It's covered with a layer of these potato-sized mineral accretions, rich in the cobalt and nickel and other potential minerals of interest. But it's also a reservoir of biodiversity. It's dominated by little animals such as worms, clams, crustaceans.
And finally, the British Health Service is reported to have subjected more than 250 lesbian, gay and bisexual people to electric shock aversion therapy in the 1960s and 70s. A BBC investigation has found that the figure is much higher than previously thought. At the time, some medical staff in Berlin and elsewhere claimed the practice could change people's sexuality or gender identity. The BBC's Henley Hassal has the details.
Survivors of aversion therapy describe being strapped to chairs and given painful electric shocks to their arms and legs. Those who were given the treatment as teenagers describe lifelong trauma, including physical pain, PTSD and depression. Many were coerced into agreeing to it, told they'd be expelled from school or would lose their jobs if they refused. The Equalities Minister, Olivia Bailey, condemned the practice as utterly appalling.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
It is Africa World Hour on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Let's look at this story now. The United Nations Human Rights Chief is warning that Sudan risks another ill-fissure amidst fierce fighting that was now spreading across the central Kordofan region that is raising fresh fears of further atrocities. The Parliamentary Rapid Support Forces seized the capital of North Darfur last month following a year-long siege marked by widespread killings of civilians, sexual violence and torture, among other atrocities. The group has been locked into a battle since April 2023, with the Sudan Armed Forces as the focus of fighting now shifting to the three oil-rich Kordofan states. Amidst reports, the United States is considering a broad range of sanctions on groups blocking efforts to achieve a ceasefire in Sudan. Showing Bryce Peace has the details.
It's a brutal conflict that has killed tens of thousands of Sudanese and brought the historically known breadbasket of Africa to its knees. Fertile lands now battlefields, triggering the largest displacement crisis in the world. Volker Turk is the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights.
I fear another wave of atrocities in Sudan amid a surge in fierce fighting across the Kordofan region. We must not allow Kordofan to become another El Fasher. Since the 25th of October, when Rapid Support Forces captured Bara City in North Kordofan, my office has documented at least 269 civilian deaths from aerial strikes, artillery shelling, and summary executions. There have also been reports of retaliatory killings, arbitrary detention, abductions, sexual violence, and forced recruitment, including of children.
The UN's humanitarian team in Sudan condemned the escalating violence across the Kordofan region and the ongoing sieges that have cut off multiple cities. They expressed deep concern about continued attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure, warning that the violence is restricting access to food, medicine and essential supplies and limiting farmers' access to their fields and markets, heightening the risk of famine spreading across the region. Communities trapped, facing extreme hardship and limited access to essential services.
There are growing concerns about the use of hateful and divisive speech that risk fueling the violence. The humanitarian situation in the besieged cities of Kaduli and Dilling is dire, with famine confirmed in Kaduli and risk of famine in Dilling. All parties are blocking humanitarian access and operations. Life-saving aid must be allowed to reach those who face starvation. The intensified violence in the past month has also triggered mass civilian displacement. Safe passage for those fleeing the horror of famine, death, and destruction is essential and a human rights imperative.
Amid reports, the United States is considering widening sanctions against the warring parties, in addition to measures imposed after a State Department legal determination in January that the RSF and allied militias had committed genocide in Sudan. Listen to U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
The president's taken on this issue of Sudan personally, not send out deputies to do it. Again, far away from the United States, because he's the only leader in the world that can bring it about to an end, not to mention all the other peace deals.
At the signing of a peace treaty between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda Thursday, this from Kenya's President William Ruto, also present at the ceremony.
As we celebrate progress in the DRC, we must not look away from other crises. I want to ask you respectfully, Mr. President, that in your quest for global peace, to support efforts to resolve the humanitarian catastrophe in Sudan.
As the UN's Turk called on all countries with influence on the parties to pressure them to stop the carnage.
Once again, I urge all states with influence over the parties to take immediate action to halt the fighting and stop the arms flows that are fueling the conflict. Have we not learned our lessons from the past? We cannot stand idly by and allow more Sudanese to become victims of horrific human rights violations. We must act, and this war must end now.
South Africa in October called on both the SAF and RSF to immediately and unconditionally implement a verifiable cessation of hostilities and called on external actors and countries involved in the crisis to adhere to their obligations under international law. I'm Sherwin Bryce Pease in New York.
That was showing Bryce Pease giving us or putting up to speed with the issues in South Sudan. Okay, let's now go to Uganda. Uganda is heading towards its January 2026 general elections, but instead of ushering a renewed democratic energy, the country appears to be reliving and intensifying the patterns of its past electoral cycle. The political temperature is rising and concerns are shrinking civil space, repression of opposition voices, and the tightening grip of state power are growing louder both at home and abroad. Now, at the center of it all is President Yoweri Museveni, now 80 years old. He has ruled Uganda for nearly 40 years, and his long-standing dominance shows no signs of wavering. Now, let's talk more about the story. We're now joined on the line by Hilema Atumani, an independent journalist in Uganda. Colleague, a very good evening to you, and welcome to Channel Africa.
Good evening, Innocent. It is Halima. And thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
Apologies, Halima. Apologies. Now, from your reporting on the ground, how prepared does Uganda appears to, to the January 2026 elections, both, administratively and politically?
I think administratively, the Electoral Commission has done everything in its power to get Ugandans ready for the elections come January. But also, we still have, a few hitches here or a few lags, if you could call that. Today, I was actually taking my daughter to register. Not that she's making 18 to be able to vote, but you realize that there's so many Ugandans who still have not registered to vote. So many Ugandans who still do not have their national IDs that are going to be able to enable them vote when the time comes. So many people do not even know where they're supposed to be polling from. So, but this is not completely to blame the Electoral Commission, but it's just to say that, Ugandans still need more civic education on regards the elections come next. Politically, well, we have 8 male candidates who are traversing the country at the moment, and vying for the top seat. Of course, for most of the media houses, the focus is on the 3 top contestants, who are the incumbent himself, that you mentioned, who's been in power for 40 years, and he's now 81 years old. Just so we know, we keep that at the back of our heads. So that is President Yoweri Museveni, and then we have, his 2-time now contender next year. That will be Bobby Wine or Robert Chagulanyi, and we have the Forum for Democratic Change, David Mafadi, and David Mafadi, in a way, you would say, replaces the 4-time presidential, for lack of a better word, loser, Dr. Kizza Besigye, who's still incarcerated and for over a year now in jail. So politically, Ugandans are charged. Ugandans are excited about the January elections. We're just waiting to see what happens.
And you shared administratively, and you spoke to you alluded again about issues around politically. Then, what is the current state of the Electoral Commission's readiness, and are there any concerns about voter registration, logistics, or transparency?
I think when it comes to voter registration, yes, there's going to be issues. People are still registering, as I said earlier, and it's now a period when they have to, pick up their registration, their national IDs. But also remember, the Electoral Commission has to work in conjunction with the national. It is called the National Identification Registration Authority, NIRA, that is supposed to ensure that every Ugandan who's liable, who is above the age of 18, is able to vote, and they have been registered. They have their voter slips, or probably know how to access their voter slips and know where they're going to vote from. When it comes, I think currently Ugandans are not worried about transparency. The question right now is the lack of a level playing ground. If you see what is going on in the field, hopefully I'm not preempting you on any other question, but if you see what's going on in the field right now, you have the president, peacefully campaigning everywhere he goes. Whether people are brought into these campaigns who don't necessarily belong to these locations, or this is just the number of people that we are seeing. But also, you find that the opposition, especially Bobby Wine, that he struggles. Every day for him is a struggle. The last thing that you want is for a presidential candidate to wake up in the morning and wear his kind of body armor or body defense armor, because he knows if he does not protect his head, he's either going to be shot at, or if he does not wear the bullet-proof vest, then there's going to be a problem. And that's the kind of election environment or campaign environment that we are seeing at the moment.
Yeah.
So it's transparency, I think, will come a bit much later. But for now, it is just the fact that, opposition candidates are saying, we just want to have a peaceful campaign period. Because I think about a month ago, we were praising the police, the Ugandan police, and be like, oh my God, for once, we are having a peaceful campaign. But it seems we praised them way too early, and now it has become a field of chaos.
Yeah, and thank you so much for describing the general public mood as this election approaches. And it, as you explained, that the issue here is not transparency. There's a bit of confidence in the processes. But as you indicated, Halima, that he's now 81. Thank you for correcting us. And having been in power for nearly 4 decades, how much public debate is there in Uganda about, President Museveni's age and his ability to effectively govern for another term?
That's a very good question. But that is a topic that you do not speak very openly about it. And the fact that I'm even whispering at the moment. I'll give you an example. I have friends who, going to launch a book next week. And this book is about the transition, the subject of the transition. And there's one thing that they are struggling with until tonight. You know how most people organize functions and then they have a keynote speaker. And for the first time, everyone that has been reached out to, as soon as they know what the title of this book is, because the title of the book is basically about the transition, the subject of the transition. This is a sacred subject that is not openly discussed, not anymore. Way back, it was something that, every debate, political leaders are talking about it. With even religious leaders will come and say, we need to discuss a transition. We need to discuss a peaceful transition. Right now, it is not a subject that Ugandans can openly discuss because they know the repercussions are not something that many people want to see. And, Uganda currently is known for keeping people in basements. So in case you go and speak loudly about the transition, you may end up in a basement somewhere.
Yeah, then let's talk about you, colleague. Now, Uganda has a long record of, clamping down on critical journalism around election periods. What are you seeing this time? Are conditions for reporters worsening or things are getting better?
It is getting worse. I will take an example for local media houses. Local media houses currently, this is a challenge that they face. They can send anyone to cover, the opposition, but also that means that, you have to make sure to ensure that this journalist safety is priority. However, as much as most local media houses want to cover the president independently, this is also a challenge. So right now, the rule is one: every local media house that requires election or campaign material from the president has to wait for the presidential press unit to give them material. So the news that they are relaying at the moment is not independent or independently collected. So you have to wait for the presidential unit to send you these videos and audio for you to relay. Which also makes it very interesting if you see how the local media is covering the president. So they'll just say, the incumbent is traversing, he's in this part of the country, and this is what he said. So there's no interaction. There's nothing that you see that is engaging. How you'd like to get the candidate, you'd like to get the audience. This is not happening when it comes to any story that is coming from the president's campaign team, because it's a one-way.
Yeah, and colleague, as we hit the home stretch of this conversation, there are growing rumors that authorities may impose an internet, a blackout or restrict social media during the election. From your sources, I know I'm putting you on the spot. How credible are these concerns?
It's actually not so much of a secret. Yesterday, we had the head of the legal affairs from the Uganda Communications Commission, and this is the body that oversees the communication in this country, especially when it comes to the media. He made it very open and said, if Ugandans do not watch what they post on social media, they are going to be shut down. Remember, right now, Ugandans are accessing, for example, Facebook. That has been shut down ever since our last election. That was in 2016 until 2021 up to date. Facebook has been off unless you use VPN. Now, what is interesting is that we have government entities that are also on Facebook, and then you ask yourself, so how are they accessing Facebook? But yesterday, the head of the legal affairs from the Uganda Communication Commission made it very open and said, we know that you are using VPN to access Facebook, and we are going to shut it down if you do not check the way you're using social media. So in the last elections, we were not warned. It was just in the evening. I remember I was actually driving home around 6:30. And the day before election, you try to text and realize, we are all off. So I guess there's some things that's going to happen this time around. So we will just wait and see.
Yeah, Halima,
and it's not a rumor. it's a threat that has been issued. I think we should even be happy or grateful that we've been told in advance.
Yeah. Just before I let you go, the last one, we spoke about transparency in the beginning of this conversation. If the shutdown were to happen, what would be the likely impact on election transparency, your job as a reporter, and citizens' participation?
I mean, one, there's definitely going to, you talked about repression. Definitely, the citizens, the audience, how are they going to trust the information that is coming out? So there's going to be, that voter apathy that we keep talking about. Voters are not going to be able to know what's going on. So the voters are going to be cut out. But also the media, the erosion of trust among the media houses that, are relaying the election information out there. And I think our experience last time was that so many media houses could not be able to do anything. People were trying to text. Imagine you trying to text 1,000 words for a story because the internet has been shut down. So there's definitely going to be, the abuse of the right to freedom of information, freedom of expression. So many rights are going to be trampled upon, but for most, what would matter the most was that Ugandans would need to know what is going on. It is an election. They are choosing who they want to lead. It is only fair that the government, if they say that they're democratic, that they let citizens know what is going on instead of shutting them down or shutting them out.
Halima Atumani, an independent journalist in Uganda. It's going to be a busy year for you next year, and please stay safe. Thank you so much for indeed making the time.
Thank you, Innocent, for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, that conversation brings us to exactly 21:26 Central African Time.
Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
Mozambique's opposition leader Venancio Mondlane has been charged with incitement to terrorism and disobedience. He faces a total of 5 charges. The charges relate to post-election violence that left hundreds of people dead. What punishment is he looking at?
The most severe charges are 2. One is incitement for terrorism, and also is being charged for mobilizing people for terrorism during the protests. These charges are really serious and severe. If he is condemned, is found guilty, he could serve 10 years plus years in jail, meaning that he would be banned from political participation, mainly for the 2028 and 2029 electoral cycle.
The director of CDD, the Center for Democracy and Development, Adriano Novunga.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
Now, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has lauded the Presidential Climate Commission for raising the country's voice and impact on issues of climate change globally. He was speaking at the 20th Commission session and the inaugural of a new commissioner at the Sefako Mahato Presidential Guest House in Pretoria on Friday. The commission was set up to oversee and facilitate a just and equitable transition towards a low carbon emission and climate resilient economy. Our political reporter Ndebu Mokobo was there and filed this report.
President Ramaphosa has lauded the work of the Presidential Climate Commission. The president charged that in fact the country's global reputation has seen an elevation in climate change matters, insisting that Pretoria's voice and opinion are the most sought after due to the sterling job of the Presidential Climate Commission.
It would be no understatement to say that the past 5 years have seen our reputation grow as a respected, but also as a principled and above all pragmatic contributor to global climate efforts. Our voice has been raised and our voice is respected. And wherever we go, South Africa's voice is always sought out and it's always heeded. This is a feather that you have added to our cap as a country. And I applaud you because your work has been really impactful.
The president also highlighted how he has been attacked globally by countries who don't believe in climate change for being alive to global warming and its impact on people's lives.
I was heavily criticized that all I ever do is to set up commissions. I'm not decisive. I set up commissions and don't do the work myself and all that. And I tried to explain in my defense that in setting up the commission, I have amassed the best brains in the country to do the work that needs to be done for the people of South Africa. Now, we're being criticized for having gotten the G20 to focus on climate change, and I'm being lampooned, globally even being prevented from participating in the next G20.
President Ramaphosa contends that the country's commitment to fighting climate change is emboldened by the fear that most countries are likely to miss the Sustainable Development Goals.
We know that these are challenging times for global climate action. 9 years since the signing of the Paris Agreement, and with just 5 years to go before the world aims to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, countries of the world are way off the track of achieving the climate goals. According to the World Meteorological Organization, last year was the warmest year on record. We are on a trajectory to exceed the 1.5 degrees Celsius warning limit.
Meanwhile, the president has also used the occasion to thank the outgoing commissioners for the excellent work they have done in modeling South Africa's sufficient consensus in decision-making. I am Tebo Mokobo in Pretoria.
The pulse of the continent in 60 minutes. Stay informed and inspired with Africa World Hour on Channel Africa.
All right, now the latest UN-sponsored push for peace in Ukraine is faltering, with diplomatic efforts showing little progress in narrowing the divide between Moscow and Kyiv. Although negotiators linked to US President Donald Trump recently suggest that Russia might be open to ending the war, the Kremlin has now issued one of its toughest warnings, yet insisting Ukrainians' forces must withdraw from the eastern Donbas region or Russia will take the remaining territory by force. Now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has responded just as firmly, making it clear that Kyiv will not surrender any territory under any circumstances. Now, we're joined by political analyst Jim Henry in the United States about the latest development. Jim, a very good evening to you, and thank you so much for making the time.
Great to be with you.
Yeah.
And we've had our audio difficulties, but we're working on that problem.
No, we can hear you loud and clear. Are you able to hear me?
Good.
Henry, are you still with us?
Hello?
Are you still with us? Can you hear me?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. How do you interpret the collapse of the latest US-sponsored peace initiative, and what structural or geopolitical factors make this conflict particularly resistant to a diplomatic intervention at this stage?
Well, I think the biggest problem is that we have a president in office who is really very closely aligned historically with Putin. And there are all kinds of theories about why that exists, but the bottom line is that last year, before he was in office, he promised 53 times on the campaign trail that he would end the Ukrainian war within a day of his inauguration. Once in office, however, he seemed to have unlimited patience for Putin and has been reluctant to take the actions necessary to put pressure on Putin to end the war. In the latest round of negotiations, there's been an embarrassing revelation that his negotiator, Witkoff, the special assistant, is someone who's had a long-time relationship with Russian interests in the United States, I can go into that in some detail, but the bottom line is at the moment we're putting a lot of pressure on Zelensky to basically cave completely and have effectively stopped aiding Ukraine economically and militarily. And this is creating enormous concern on the part of our traditional allies in NATO that the basic NATO alliance is over.
Yeah.
There's a lot of debate within the United States. There has been about who is responsible for this situation, but I think a vast majority of American voters basically support Ukraine and have looked at this argument about the origins of the war as kind of academic. In fact, it's made by academics like my classmate Jeffrey Sachs, who blames the whole thing on NATO. That seems a little bit hard to reconcile with the fact that the war is now going on for more than 3 years. Russia alone has lost more than 200,000 dead and 1 million casualties. Ukraine has been devastated. It's in nobody's interest for this to go on, but Putin is bound to determine to keep going. Russian economy is really suffering, and one of the points we've been making in our analysis is that it is heavily dependent on what we call oil washing. An enormous amount of oil that Russia has to export to pay for the war, and it's about 7 million barrels or more per day of oil that it exports. The only way it's able to do that is by effectively selling oil to the West, and he's figured out ways to do that by way of some special deals that it cut with India, involving India's largest refineries in Gujarat. So under the current tariffs, of course, the United States, Trump made noise about penalizing companies that were trading oil. But in effect, there's still a 0% U.S. tariff on refined petroleum that goes by way of Gujarat. In other words, the oil is going all the way through the down the Baltic, around to the Suez Canal. Sometimes it's offloaded into the so-called shadow fleet of tankers, most of whom are operating off the coast of Oman. And then it goes on to these, the world's largest refinery in Gujarat is owned by the richest guy in India. And if it comes out of India, about 2 to 3 million barrels per day of the 7 billion that Russia is exporting have been refined in India and then are re-exported to the U.S., to Europe, to South Africa, in fact, is buying a lot of the refined petroleum from India. So I know South Africa used to have 2 refineries of its own, and it's right next door to Angola. You kind of wonder why it needs to rely on Indian refined petroleum. But obviously there's a lot of interests at stake.
Yeah, perhaps also because we're in the BRICS bloc. But I know that you touched on this, Henry, but I'm keen to hear your view. To what extent did Washington miscalculated Moscow's intervention? And do you believe U.S. negotiators underestimated Russia's willingness to perhaps compromise? And also, do you believe that they underestimated its long-term territorial ambitions? But also, you mentioned that this war is weighing heavily on Russia. They're spending a lot of money on this war. How long do you think they'll keep up?
Well, that's really a hard thing for us to appraise without looking at who's running Russia and what they're up to. I think, look, there's a tiny group, relatively tiny group of people that are running that country at the moment. It's hardly a democracy. I've lost good friends there. journalists who are in jail. It's I think Putin has lost sight of what his original objective was. I think he planned for this all to be over in a few days after the invasion in February 2022. He thought this would be relatively quick. What he underestimated was the will of the Ukrainians to resist, and probably the will of NATO and the United States for a while to support Zelensky. And he appears to have cloaked his claims on the Ukraine in a kind of grand imperial statement. He doesn't really regard Ukraine as a separate country. He regards it as traditionally part of Russia and of the kind of empire. Russia itself has stopped growing economically. I mean, inflation has risen. There are dramatic increases in interest rates. There's a lot of people who have left the country, skilled labor, and they're facing a bit of a demographic crisis. So some people are saying that this is actually partly motivated by the fact that if you look at the projections for Russia's population through 2050 and beyond, it's kind of peak Russia right now. This is the last generation that he could use to fight such a war. We've seen him recruiting North Koreans. We've seen him hijacking South Africans to go fight in his war. So he's kind of desperate to find troops on the ground, and he's been heavily reliant on the drones that he's manufacturing. So there's kind of a intense drone conflict because Ukraine turns out to be pretty good at managing a drone warfare. But there's quite a strong degree of pessimism among Ukrainians right now. They're kind of sick of this war themselves. So it's sort of a battle of wills at the moment. I don't think Putin can make an argument for the economics of this conflict. He is able to proceed because he's able to sell Russian crude, and because that's supporting about 40 to 50% of the military budget.
Right.
But he's not got any exports. Nobody's investing in Russia. They have no particular technology base.
Yeah.
I don't think the U.S. policy, as I say, was always kind of a bit of chicanery on Trump's part. I think he's had a long-standing relationship with Russia.
But talking, Henry, sorry to interject, but talking about U.S., how significant is the role of U.S. domestic politics in really shaping America's approach to the war, especially with Trump's linked negotiators entering the picture? What message does this send internationally about, the continuity of U.S. foreign policy?
Oh, I think it's a terrific, if you combine it with all the other things that Trump has been doing with our allies and Canada, antagonizing Mexico and Canada, now threatening to invade Venezuela. Of course, Venezuela may be a dictatorship, and it may actually export some drugs to the United States. But this is a conflict that 70% of Americans don't want with Venezuela. So I don't think Trump policy with respect to Ukraine is popular. His support levels have plummeted. It's down to 36%. 49% of Americans are in favor of impeaching him again. He's already been impeached twice by the House of Representatives, and it's failed to pass the Senate. But there's a growing movement, with maybe up to 10 to 20 senators resigning and not running for re-election over the next few years. There's a growing, I think, chance that we'll have an ouster.
Right.
Some people that most people are not expecting. But the short answer to your question is his policies have been disastrous. His stance with respect to Gaza is not has driven a big fraction of the American people to turn against Israel, and especially among young people, it's a position that's just indefensible. And so, right across the board, I think, certainly if you talk to American veterans, that's a powerful constituency in this country.
Yeah.
They are appalled to see us essentially siding with fascism in our Russia policy. They basically can't explain how we can possibly side with the aggressor, who's single-handedly responsible for all this.
Yeah.
So, I think he's basically just, if it wasn't that he had taken control of the House and the Senate and as well as the Supreme Court
Indeed.
in the last election, he managed to do that, he'd be out.
All right.
If we had a parliamentary system, like they do in the UK or France, he would be voted out of office.
Indeed. Because of time, we're going to have to leave it there. Political analyst Jim Hendry in the United States. Thank you so very much for indeed making the time.
Great. You're very welcome anytime at all. We have a lot of activity to cover. So speak to you soon.
All right. Thank you so much. That conversation, of course, brings us to exactly 21:46 Central African Time. That was political analyst Jim Hendry talking to us about the developments between Russia and Ukraine.
Es-tu préoccupé par quelque chose? Es-tu passionné par les questions qui comptent? As-tu une voix qui mérite d'être entendue? Eh bien, nous avons la plateforme parfaite pour toi. Téléphone-nous ou fais-nous un WhatsApp au +27 66 408 87 42 et nous te rappellerons. Sois dans la conversation.
Salut Channel Africa, ici Beno le diamant rouge et Binal Sport depuis le Cameroun, le pays des lions. Voilà.
Sois dans la conversation. Il ne s'agit pas seulement de parler, mais c'est ta chance d'exprimer ton point de vue, de partager tes opinions et de t'engager avec une communauté qui valorise ton avis. Suivez-nous sur les réseaux sociaux, visitez notre site www.channelafrica.co.za et préparez-vous à partager vos points de vue sur Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tshepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thank you for staying with us on Africa World Hour. If you just joined us, this is Channel Africa, the African perspective. On this now, the South African Medical Research Council is in partnership with the University of Cape Town, has launched a 5-year multidisciplinary project to explore the political, economic and social drivers of alcohol misuse in South Africa and Botswana. Beyond understanding the root causes, the initiative seeks to assess the wide-ranging impacts of alcohol on individuals, families and communities. We're now joined on the line by Marieke Teron, a researcher at the South African Medical Research Council. A very good evening to you and thank you so much for making the time.
Good evening, Innocent. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think this research is important as it comes because we're in the festive season and I would imagine people will be indulging in alcohol. Can you explain what motivated this study and why it's important to investigate harmful alcohol use in both South Africa and Botswana specifically?
Thank you. Yes. So you bring up a very important point here about Christmas and people indulging. So I found that a lot of people think that alcohol is just fine. It's normal to drink alcohol. We can have alcohol every single day and nothing bad will happen. But actually, alcohol is a poison to our body. So it is and has been classified as a grade 1 carcinogen by the International Agency for Research on Cancer. So people need to understand that if you do drink something, any little bit of alcohol is actually bad for your body. and it can cause cancer. And it has been shown that this is one of the causes of cancer, as bad as tobacco, same level as asbestos, and we need to be careful of it. And if we do have it, we need to understand what our risks are when we have that. But, and they've known this from the 1980s already. So I feel we know that people don't understand the level of risk they are taking, and they think, oh, alcohol is just fine. It doesn't do anything bad to us. But it does do many things bad to our own bodies, as well as the people around us. When we look at all the effects that alcohol has, when people drink too much, we see car crashes, we see pedestrians getting in accidents, and violence towards other people. So it doesn't only affect us on our own, but also people around us.
Yeah, indeed. Is that what the project aims to explore? What are the key political, economic, and social drivers here, Theron, on harmful alcohol consumption?
Yes, so this research project is multi-layered. So we're going to be looking at what are the regulations and the policies in South Africa as well as in Botswana. So that is a very nice part of this project, is that we can learn from each other. We can see what is happening in Botswana, how many alcohol outlets are there in the areas that we do research in, as well as what do people think about alcohol in Botswana? And then we also look at South Africa and the areas, what do our people think in South Africa about alcohol? How much alcohol are they drinking? And how many alcohol outlets are there? So when we have all of this information, we can then look at comparisons between maybe what is Botswana doing that we can learn from? What is South Africa doing that Botswana can learn from? So that is kind of where we're going from. And we are doing this in collaboration with the communities. So firstly, we do a little bit of research, see how much people are drinking and all of these things. But most importantly, in the next 4 years, we want to see how we can collaborate with the communities and see what they need. And once we understand what they need, we can then come up with ways that we can push forward with stricter alcohol regulations so that we can enforce those regulations and create better ones to protect people of the country. And then that will happen both in Botswana as well as here in South Africa.
Yeah, Theron, what kind of data and research methods are you using to measure alcohol-related harm across communities, and how credible is this data?
So we're using standardized tools, which has been implemented in various other studies to measure alcohol use. So we have done a household survey of 2,400 people in South Africa already. That information we will then relay back to the community so that they understand. We are also doing geospatial mapping of alcohol outlets in those areas, which will give us an understanding of how many alcohol outlets are within the areas where we did the household survey. Then we do analysis of policies and laws. We are doing investigations of the alcohol supply chains to see and understand how that works and where we could possibly make changes. Focus group discussions with adults as well as adolescents, so adolescents between the ages of 15 and 18, getting a better understanding of what people think of alcohol use, the marketing thereof, and what do they think of the effects of alcohol in their community. We also interview some alcohol outlet vendors, so the owners of these outlets. And then lastly, we are going to put all of this information together with other additional health-related and alcohol information into a computer Bayesian model, that they call it, to see how we can make interventions work better and what effect will that have on people's alcohol use.
Yeah, and Marike, how will the study account for differences in, for an example, issues around culture, policy, and access to alcohol between South Africa and Botswana? And also, how do you envision the research findings being used to formulate some sort of policies on or interventions to perhaps reduce harmful alcohol use in both countries?
So the nice thing with this project is that we have got a collaborative group, researchers from Botswana as well. So everything that we're doing in South Africa regarding the policy analysis and the supply chain is copied in South Africa as well as in Botswana. So that means we will have the focus group discussions with the culture, with Botswana, adults and adolescents in Botswana, so that we can understand how it differs. And the researchers in Botswana will be doing that work. So that is how we will make sure that we get to grips with the cultural differences, and then see how we can use that.
Yeah, and could this study lead to recommendations around regulating alcohol sales, advertising, or pricing in the region and beyond?
Yes, absolutely. So we know the World Health Organization has 5 standard things that they've already proven that assists in reducing harmful alcohol use in population level. So once we have got this information about what marketing is taking place, the pricing of the alcohol, and we use all of this information to put into our Bayesian model, we will then be able to see which parts will help us to improve our policies and regulations and which ones are the best to use. So that is where we will then see how we can go forward with our research, including using this collaborative effect, getting community interactions, ensuring that the communities are first asked what it is that they need, and then from that we can get a push through with the communities to get these regulations put in place, as well as better enforcement of the regulations that we already have.
Marike Theron, a researcher at the South African Medical Research Council, thank you so much for indeed making the time.
Thank you, Innocent. Have a good evening.
All right, that conversation brings us to exactly 21:57 Central African Time.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
All right, 600 people are going to benefit from an initiative of the Community Social Investment CSI initiative by the Gautrain Management Agency in South Africa. Now, the agency has pledged 600 buckets full of non-perishable groceries, which will be donated to the needy in the Gauteng province. The packaging of the buckets drive took place at Gautrain Pretoria, Midrand and Sinton stations with the help of Gautrain passengers. The Gautrain Management Agency board and staff and the provincial government leadership. Sisi Sekalo has the details.
The Buckets of Hope initiative was first launched on Mandela Day in July 2025, providing nourishment and a message of care to 600 community members identified by non-profit organizations. Gautrain Management Agency's Chief Executive Officer, Tshepo Khobe, says this is the second time that they are doing Buckets of Hope, and that the initiative is about them sharing the hope that is carried by the millions that ride in their trains. He added that every time somebody goes on the train, there's a hope for a beautiful day and a hope for a better day. Hence the initiative to cheer those in need during the festive season.
As we draw close to the end of the year, there are families that will not have anything during the festive season. And this is our way of being able to say, let's share the love, let's share the ability for us to be able to enjoy the festive season similarly to anybody else who would be enjoying themselves as they go home, as they visit their families and everything that goes with that. And
Inspiring report there from Sisi Sikhalo about Gautrain donations. All right, it's that time of the evening where I welcome African Diaries with Shayla. Shayla, very good evening to you. What can we expect?
So in this edition of African Diaries, Innocent, we're going to be looking at captains of industry. And we're going to be looking at a lady who is very, very big about feminine energy, right? Mm-hmm. So she carries this into her workspace, into her love life, all things manifestation, all things accentuating emotion, accentuating femininity. Mm. And I want to find out some of the terms. I learned about a bathing girly. I don't know what a bathing girly is. It's a girly who baths. Like, there's a lot to there's a lot to learn today. I feel like I'm going to be in school. And then in the second hour of the show, we get into top 6 love songs. It's an opportunity to learn about love music by the African continent.
All right. Would surely be listening. Sounds interesting. All right, that wraps up tonight's installment of Africa World Hour. From myself, Innocent Semosa, in for Tshepiso Makwetla, producer Tumelo Zolo, and the rest of the African World Hour team. Thank you for listening. For comments on the show, send us an email at info@channelafrica.co.org. For myself, Innocent Semosa, on behalf of the team behind the scenes, it's goodbye and God bless.
Conversations that touch the